elaborate Battenberg cakes, delicate Victoria sponges, and perfect gingerbread adorned Victorian drawing rooms. But venture into the bakehouses and you'll find coal dust hell, 16-hour shifts, workers with stone lungs. When the bread riots erupted in 1855, it wasn't just hunger, it was a rebellion. Welcome to Quill and Compass. Today, we're following the twisted journey from Persian almond paste to poisonous perfection. We'll discover how some delightful substances ended up in bread, why bakers died younger than coal miners, and the disorder in Liverpool that sparked nationwide riots. Tell me, would you eat a marzipan fruit if you knew it might be painted with arsenic? This is the story of sweetness and suffering. Why craft all those cakes? And who baked all that bread?
From Persian medicine to Victorian status symbol.
Picture this. A simple almond paste travels from 9th century Persia to become the ultimate Victorian flex. Trade routes carried it westward through Arab influence in Spain or Venice, transforming from humble remedy into precious luxury. When it reached Tudor England, Queen Elizabeth I is recorded as enjoying sweetmeats, and marzipan featured at elite banquets where sugar and almonds were expensive imports, rather like owning a luxury sports car today. Tudor banquets featured elaborate marzipan sculptures, miniature castles, ships, mythical beasts, and realistic reproductions of fruits and fowl. These weren't just desserts, they were status symbols designed to impress and astound guests. Later, Victorian confectioners became artists, using intricate wooden and metal molds to craft their wonders, hand-painting their creations to be displayed beautifully on tiered stands. The Industrial Revolution changed everything. Sugar beet cultivation and industrial processing made sugar more accessible, and suddenly this once royal luxury was within reach of the middle classes. The aspiring bourgeoisie eagerly embraced marzipan creations to demonstrate their prosperity and newfound social standing. Home baking flourished, cookbooks multiplied, and marzipan's wonderfully pliable nature made it perfect for domestic arts. The Christmas cake became a Victorian staple, almost demanding a layer beneath the royal icing. This practice cemented marzipan's place in British culinary tradition. The Battenberg cake exemplifies the transformation from luxury to common treat perfectly. Legend has it that it was created in 1884 to celebrate the marriage of Queen Victoria's granddaughter, Princess Victoria, to Prince Louis of Battenberg, its 4 squares representing the 4 Battenberg princes. Here was marzipan celebrating royal events, whilst also being accessible to middle-class drawing rooms. An irony emerged as it became accessible, yet retained its aura of refinement and social distinction. Those who could afford a more elaborate lifestyle, with servants and time for entertaining, readily incorporated marzipan into their celebratory foods. It carried an air of sophistication even as it became widespread, like champagne at a wedding versus beer at a pub. While not as cheap as a penny sweet, marzipan was no longer exclusive to the monarch. The middle and upper classes could afford this marker of refined taste, this edible symbol of their ability to appreciate life's finer things. But what most people never saw, behind the delicious delights, was the kitchen and its costs.
The golden age of poisonous perfection.
The era's most celebrated treats dominated fashionable drawing rooms. Victoria sponge with its delicate layers, the distinctive checkered Battenberg cake, and elaborate gingerbread houses at Christmas. But here's the shocking truth about those vibrant colors that made these treats so visually stunning. Many Victorian cake colorings were actually industrial pigments, and they could cause real harm. Confectioners were essentially lacing their products with deadly substances, that cheerful green adorning marzipan fruits packed with arsenic. The bright yellows and rich reds coating fancy cakes contained heavy metals that slowly poisoned everyone who ate them. Shields green was a particular favorite among decorators because of its brilliant shade. This pigment delivered the perfect emerald hue for leaves, stems, and decorative flourishes. Many decorators either didn't understand the long-term risks or accepted them for the sake of vibrant color. The arsenic content was substantial enough to cause genuine harm, yet the color was so appealing that its use spread throughout the baking and confectionery industry. The health effects were severe. Arsenic exposure led to gastrointestinal problems and neurological damage. The slow-acting nature made links hard to prove. Symptoms developed gradually over time, allowing these dangerous practices to continue unchecked for years. You see traces of this in doctors' reports and satirical prints of the era. Imagine the refined middle-class drawing room, ladies in their best dresses sampling delicate cakes that were quietly poisoning them. The pursuit of visual perfection trumped any concern for consumer safety, creating a deadly trade-off between aesthetics and health. Victorian baking underwent two simultaneous revolutions. Baking powder transformed texture, creating lighter, airier sponges that delighted the palate. At the same time, toxic dyes revolutionized appearance, producing colors so vibrant they seemed almost magical. These parallel developments created treats that looked and tasted better than ever before, while hiding sinister secrets. Social pressure drove these dangerous practices. Victorian society demanded that food look as good as it tasted, maybe better. A plain cake simply wouldn't do for important occasions. Hostesses competed to present the most stunning spreads, pushing confectioners to achieve ever more brilliant colors and elaborate decorations. The Charlotte Russe exemplifies this perfectly. Such an elaborate showstopper for dinner parties demanded the most striking visual impact possible. The lack of food safety regulations created an environment where beauty literally killed. Confectioners operated without oversight, using whatever substances produced the desired visual effects. The era's sweet legacy is forever tainted by the acceptance of slow-motion poisoning as the cost of elegance. But the cosmetics of cake are only half the bakery, and for special occasions. Surely there could be nothing wrong with a plain cob loaf for your daily bread. It was the workers who first paid the cost in dust and hours.
Coal dust hell, the baker's inferno.
Enter the Victorian bakehouse, a world of relentless heat, choking dust and grinding labor where workers endured 112-hour work weeks. These weren't quaint artisan shops with rustic charm. They were industrial infernos where coal-fired ovens generated crushing heat that turned every surface into a furnace. The air hung thick with flour dust, mixed with coal soot, creating a toxic cocktail that workers breathed every moment of their shifts. Bakers started work in the late evening, laboring through the night to prepare fresh loaves for morning customers. They'd catch maybe 3 hours of sleep on flour sacks or wooden boards before starting the afternoon batch. This wasn't occasional overtime. This was every single day, week after week, year after year. Poor ventilation trapped dust and fumes inside these cramped spaces. Coal-fired ovens needed ventilation to function, but proper air circulation was expensive and rarely installed. The result was air so thick you could barely breathe, let alone work efficiently. The lack of safety regulations meant owners prioritized profit over worker welfare, viewing bakers as expendable. The physical toll of bakers' lung and chronic respiratory disease came from the constant flour and coal dust exposure. This condition wasn't just uncomfortable, it was fatal. The relentless inhalation of these particles scarred lung tissue like asbestos exposure, making breathing progressively harder until workers literally suffocated from their own trade. Night shifts and social isolation cut bakers off from normal Victorian life. While respectable families attended church and gathered for Sunday dinner, bakers slept or worked. They missed family events, community gatherings, and normal social rhythms. Their nocturnal existence made them outsiders in a society that valued conformity to daylight schedules. A grey film of flour and soot coated their faces and hands, a permanent badge of the job. You could spot a baker on the street by this visible marker of their trade, identifying them as members of this suffering underclass. Contemporary accounts suggest bakers' life expectancy was even lower than many other industrial trades, including coal miners. Think about that for a moment. Coal mining was notoriously deadly, yet baking, feeding the nation's families, proved even more lethal. The combination of sleep deprivation, toxic air, extreme heat, and physical exhaustion created a perfect storm of health destruction. These conditions created a powder keg of resentment that simmered beneath Victorian society's polite surface. Bakers understood they were being slowly killed by their work while producing food for families who never thought about the human cost. The contrast between the wholesome bread on dining tables and the hellish conditions of its creation bred deep anger among workers. The men who fed Britain were trapped in a profession that demanded everything and offered suffering in return. Whilst they struggled to simply breathe, perhaps it isn't so surprising to learn that they developed ways to cut corners and make more money.
The Great Deception: chalk, plaster, and bone.
Bread adulteration was a dirty secret of Victorian Britain, a widespread practice that transformed the nation's most basic food into a chemical experiment. Bakers faced relentless pressure to keep prices low while maintaining profits, so they turned to deception. This wasn't a few rogue operators, it was systematic fraud that reached into every working-class kitchen across the country. Here's where the horror really begins. The list of adulterants reads like a builder's supply catalogue: chalk, plaster, bone, alum. These substances bulked up the dough, adding weight and volume while costing virtually nothing. Alum bleached flour white, making cheap loaves look like expensive ones. Chalk powder and plaster of Paris created volume that fooled customers into thinking they were getting value for money. Powdered bone, yes, ground animal bones, served as a cheap filler. Each adulterant served a specific purpose in the grand deception, creating loaves that looked normal but were essentially edible building materials. Yummy. The adulterants caused stomach problems, malnutrition, and outright poisoning among working families. Dr. Arthur Hassel's investigations in the 1850s revealed a shocking truth. Over half of examined bread contained alum. Alum disrupted digestion, while chalk and plaster provided no nutritional value whatsoever. Children suffered developmental problems from eating these substances regularly. Families thought they were buying sustenance, but were actually purchasing slow-acting poison. Bread was sold by weight. Short weight practices compounded the fraud. A standard loaf was supposed to be a quarter-pound or 2-pound loaf. They were often deliberately sold underweight, meaning families lost vital calories they desperately needed and had paid for. This double theft, adulterated and underweight, targeted the very people who could least afford either deception. These fraudulent practices specifically targeted the poor, who depended on bread for their daily calories. Wealthy families could afford meat, vegetables, and variety. Working families lived on bread, making it their primary source of nutrition. By adulterating this essential food, bakers were literally stealing nourishment from those who needed it most. The economic logic was brutal but simple. Profit over public health. Victorian bakers operated under crushing competition and thin margins. Adulterants cost pennies, while flour cost pounds. The mathematics of survival drove them to poison their own customers rather than accept lower profits. No regulations existed to stop them, and no inspectors checked their practices. Public awareness of this systematic poisoning understandably brewed resentment. Word spread through working-class communities. Mothers discovered they'd been unknowingly feeding their families building materials. The anger was personal, immediate, and justified. Britain's most essential food had become a vehicle for mass poisoning. Every loaf represented a betrayal of trust between baker and customer. The very substance that should have sustained life instead threatened it, creating a crisis of confidence that would soon explode into violence.
When the Mersey froze.
February 19th, 1855. The Mersey had frozen solid, turning Liverpool's lifeline into a sheet of ice. No ships could dock, no cargo could move. No work existed for thousands of dock labourers and corn porters who depended on river trade for their daily wages. So, here's where economic collapse, combined with bread adulteration knowledge, created perfect storm conditions. These weren't just unemployed workers. They were families who, now, couldn't even afford the poisoned loaves. Desperation mixed with betrayal creates a volatile combination that needs only the smallest spark to ignite. That spark came during a charitable bread distribution. 3 elderly women were crushed to death in a stampede of hungry families desperate to avoid starvation. Grandmothers literally trampled underfoot by neighbors, equally desperate for survival. The tragedy highlighted a system that had utterly failed its most vulnerable citizens. This catalyst transformed individual desperation into collective rage that spread like wildfire through Liverpool's working districts. The deaths proved that even charity couldn't save them from a system designed to exploit and abandon them. Fury becomes dangerous when thousands of people have nothing left to lose. Riots erupted in areas such as Scotland Road, Shaw's Brow, Vauxhall and Dale Street, where bakeries were stripped bare. The unrest spread beyond Liverpool to London's East End, Whitechapel and Bermondsey. These districts faced identical problems: frozen trade, unemployment, contaminated bread. The participants were largely unemployed workers, many women, and a significant Irish community presence, all sharing the same grinding poverty and the same bitter knowledge that their most basic food had been systematically poisoned for profit. They stripped bakeries, took bread, flour and coal, and tore out shop fronts. Police were stoned when they tried to intervene. Shop contents were distributed among hungry families. This wasn't mindless destruction. It was strategic appropriation of the essentials for survival. Rioters demonstrated remarkable solidarity by freeing their captured comrades from police custody. Crowds would surround the officers and forcibly liberate the prisoners. This collective defiance showed how completely the social contract had broken down. The law offered no protection, so communities protected themselves. The crowd wasn't after spectacle. They were after food and the means to survive. Unfortunately, the authorities' response would prove they'd learned absolutely nothing from the uprising's underlying causes.
Blood, bread, and broken promises.
Liverpool's mayor immediately mobilized the entire police force across the city. Every available constable was called to active duty, transforming ordinary streets into occupied territory. Special constables were enlisted to augment the overwhelmed regular police, turning ordinary citizens into temporary law enforcement against their own neighbors who were simply trying to feed their families. The military was prepared as a last resort, with orders to be ready for deployment, meaning the government was willing to use lethal force against starving workers if necessary. Picture cannons aimed at bread queues. That's how far Victorian authorities were prepared to go. Harsh sentences were designed as deterrents rather than justice. Over 100 people faced arrest in Liverpool alone, with many receiving 3 months of hard labor, regardless of their previous clean records. Many of the arrested had no prior criminal history whatsoever. These weren't career criminals. They were desperate parents trying to feed their children, yet the courts treated them like dangerous revolutionaries. They punished starving people for taking bread. But did they punish the bakers or change the broken system? Despite witnessing mass desperation that drove ordinary families to risk imprisonment for bread, authorities implemented zero meaningful changes to address the underlying causes. No investigation into bread adulteration. No regulation of working conditions or wages. The system that created the crisis remained completely untouched. The establishment chose punishment over prevention with calculated precision. They understood the riots weren't random violence, yet their solution involved anything except addressing why families were willing to risk everything for something so basic. The threat of military action and mass imprisonment succeeded in crushing the immediate uprising. Streets returned to their previous quiet desperation. Shops reopened their doors to customers who still couldn't afford uncontaminated food. The visible symptoms of systemic failure disappeared, but the disease remained completely untreated. Bakers continued adulterating bread with chalk and plaster. Workers continued suffering in coal dust hell. Families continued choosing between starvation and slow poisoning. The riots had changed nothing except proving how far authorities would go to preserve profitable exploitation. From the drawing room treats that made lives sweeter to the ever-essential daily loaf, Victorian Britain's beloved baked goods were built on practices that would horrify modern consumers. Tell us in the comments, do you know the quality of the ingredients in your food? Would you have taken the bread to feed your hungry family, knowing the consequences? Hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoyed this episode. Which Victorian food fact surprised you most? Marzipan beasts or baker's lung? Tell us below. Bye for now.